Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are playing as the High Elves against the Brettonians on the map Summer Song. And so, for those of you who don't know or haven't necessarily been keeping up with matchups, Brettonia early on, especially when Warhammer 2 first came out, Brettonia was considered one of the worst factions. They'd just taken quite a bit of some rebalancing in Warhammer 1, and their performance was, to put it mildly, subpar compared to most of the New World factions. And the High Elf matchup was definitely very difficult for them due to the High Elves' good selection of infantry anti-large and well-armored infantry anti-large, as well as just superior shooting to just mow through the lightly armored Brettonian infantry. Nonetheless, there were a few strategies that turned out to be pretty effective against the High Elves, and one of them was a strategy that we're kind of countering here, and it was a strategy that I do believe it was Gobbo King who first started running around with a whole bunch of Grail Knights, the Fey Enchantress, and a bunch of infantry, a Trebuchet to kind of just work on your opponent's troops, and relying essentially just on Grail Knights cycle charging your opponent to death. And really, I do believe this was a strategy that was first kind of demonstrated by Gobbo King, and it's kind of taken off, and this has become actually a very difficult strategy for the High Elves to deal with. And the main problem, of course, for the High Elves is that they just don't have the mobility to stop the Brettonian cavalry. So here I'm kind of trying to, or seeking to counter it. I did bring Tyrion for my lord. Tyrion, of course, is just a very solid combat lord. Great melee attack, melee defense, good armor. Of course, he's just very tanky. He's got the Heart of Avalorn, giving him that HP boost. Stand your ground, of course, to boost his own troops. Feint Interpost, just boosting his stats through the roof. The physical resistance won't do very much for him against Grail Knights, but if he has to dual enemy lord, this can actually be really useful. Then he also does have Sunfang, which can still be useful against the sort of Brettonian mobs of infantry, just annihilating them very, very easily. Alongside him, I did bring two heroes. One of them is a Mage of Light. She is, of course, pretty powerful. The Lore of Light's always been pretty good. Despite the fact that Net of Mintok got nerfed in the sense that it's no longer a baseline AoE, it still has a 20-second duration, and it's dirt cheap at only 9 Winds of Magic. I also did bring Frost Protection, simply to boost my troops. Of course, 90 armor is actually pretty decent for the High Elves, and especially against Brettonia, which tends to lack great armor-piercing options. I also did bring the Book of Hoth, as well as the Starwood Staff, simply to boost my power reserves. And it's worth noting, I think, that the Mage of Light, or just the Elven Mages in general, not even mentioning the Lore Master, of course, are actually pretty decent in melee until their martial prowess wears off. I also did bring a Noble, which is your only armor-piercing mounted anti-large option for the High Elves, and he's coming in unupgraded, unequipped with anything, but he does very solid armor, okay HP pool, and of course a bonus versus large of 35, stacking on top of that melee attack of 44, so really gets just about anything large, he'll definitely lay the smackdown on it. And I've got them backed by these Dragon Princes, so I've this very mobile goon squad of heavily armored troops and a mage, ready to kind of hopefully shut down and pinion enemy and troops that are trying to sneak into my backline. I didn't bother with shooting, figuring it would get run down by cavalry, and instead I did bring a front line composed of white lines of Krace, some of which you can see are already taking fire from my opponent's trebuchets. You know, Spearmen, basically just a filler unit, and then 2 units of the mighty Phoenix Guard, one on either end here. And these guys are really there, of course, to anchor the line and help it hold against the enemy cavalry, and also just provide some frontline support if needed. These guys have monstrous melee stats. They're very, very good there. Now, for my opponent, he did bring a pretty conventional, I think, counter or anti High Elf build. Definitely not for example, exactly the same as what the Gobbo King runs or what some of those better players run, but it's definitely still very solid. You can see frontline composed of peasants, simply to soak up the charge. Backed by 3 units of Grail Knights, you can see they're scattered all over. The Fey Enchantress, of course, coming in with a nice selection of healing spells. She does have Regrowth, Stone Skin, or Flesh to Stone, and Earth Blood for the heals. Also the Midst of the Lady, of course, to slowly but surely chip away at my troops. Arcane Conduit for that Wind of Magic, Favor of the Fae for the melee attack, and Chalice of Potions, simply to nuke down a blob of infantry somewhere. Much of Foot Squires do make up the front line, so definitely somewhat higher quality than what you usually see with these sorts of builds. Blessed Field Trebuchets in the back, with Spearmen at Arms with shields on top of them. And the Blessed Field Trebuchets are already chipping away at my troops, kind of poking away at the Phoenix Guard and those units. So without further ado, we are going to throw things in the full gear here. You can see I do apologize a little bit for that long-winded intro. You can see my opponent, though, here getting very cheeky. As many of you know, the lance formation has been significantly buffed, and you can see he just plows into my white lines, knocking them down by 5 miles immediately, causing a huge issue there. But I counterattack, I get my net off on the Grail Lines, and you can see the Phoenix Guard on top of them, these guys are getting annihilated. Now, unfortunately, I do clump up here for the Trebuchet, but you can see the Dragon Princes plow in, they pile in with the Noble, they pile in with Tyrion, and the Grail Knights are just going down like 9 pins. They're getting shredded, and they're going down very, very quickly. I also do manage to catch the rest of my opponent's infantry kind of here in the pits. You can see the spearmen piling in, just providing additional support. My opponent is getting a lovely chalice of potions there, but I've popped stand your ground as well as frost protection on this Phoenix Guard, and I'm really kind of dragging these Grail Knights into the muck. They're really just struggling to get clear, and of course that trebuchet firewall, definitely useful, is also going to damage my opponent's troops as well. You can see unfortunately these white lines of Crace really did get nuked there, but I, in my turn, do whittle down these foot squires as well as the peasants with a cast of Sunfang. On the flank, white lines of Crace are getting rear charged by the Grail Knights, who did get caught out of position. My opponent was so focused on the micro on the left flank that he missed it, and here I managed to catch Knights with the Phoenix Guard, and you can see them pursuing them, trying to run them down and really jab them to death. Now, unfortunately, I don't really have the tools necessary to shut down the Blessed Field Trebuchets, and these white lines of Crace will get intercepted relatively easily by the Spearmen at Arms. You can see over here the Grail Knights have gotten clear. They're down to 21 models, and I'm in hot pursuit with the Dragon Princes and my Roland Goon Squad there. You can see these Grail Knights are very badly whittled down. And of course my opponent, while he does have Lord of Magic, he can't bring models back, and he's definitely in kind of a rough spot. You can see over here the Phoenix Guard are slugging it out with these mobs of Spearmen, and of course the Trebuchet will be whittling them down the whole time. Over here the Grail Knights do get caught, and despite a cast of Flesh to Stone, will get torn apart very, very quickly by Tyrion, the Mage of Light, and all those units. And seeing my opponent closing in with his Grail Knights, I do cast the Net of a Mintok, which allows me to mow down these Grail Knights, leaving the Fey Enchantress in an absolutely atrocious position where I could potentially goon her here and knock her out. You can see she is casting an Earthblood, but it's way too late for these Grail Knights, who are shattered, and despite the catapults coming in, we are now swarming the Fey Enchantress and really applying some pressure to her. Perhaps it would have been more ideal for me here to engage on the Grail Knights, since the Fey Enchantress is very quick and can outrun even Tyrion, but nonetheless, definitely pretty nifty catch there, and she's taking some heavy damage. Unfortunately, my opponent does get a charge here on the Dragon Princes, and despite my cast of Frost Protection, these guys will get melted down pretty quickly. They're simply not that tanky, but in the turn, these Grail Knights will get caught by the Noble and Tyrion and all them, and they will get chopped down in their turn. Over in the front, in the meantime, you can see the Phoenix Guard doing a pretty good job, but they are getting whittled down by that Trebuchet fire. You can see the Trebuchet fire coming into these blobs of infantry that I have, and I'm really not able to do much about that. These white lines of Crace are also getting run down by the Grail Knights, unable to hack their way through the Spearmen at Arms, especially as their martial prowess is wearing off. And with the loss of martial prowess, of course, high elf units get much, much worse. Over on this flank, you can see the Grail Knights fighting tooth and nail. They do have very high morale, so they just will not break. But against the Noble, against Tyrion, they really don't stand a chance, despite all their upgrades. You can see they are slowly but surely getting torn apart and dragged into the muck. Tyrion here is just being an absolute champ, with Feint and Riposte, of course, providing monstrous stats, and allowing him to kind of cover the Noble and cover my Mage, who are actually contributing some decent damage here. It's worth noting, of course, that the Grail Knights don't have good melee defense at all, 31, so even the Mage of Light has about a 50% chance to hit. Normally, I do believe some chances that have been nerfed, but still she has about a 40 to 50% chance to hit, which is pretty solid. You can see the Grail Knights there being routed off and chased back, but now I do just kind of change targets. You can see my Phoenix Guard here getting nuked down by that brutal Field Trebuchet fire, and the Fey Enchantress does plow into the white lines of Crace here, whittling them down a little bit, though now I do get my heroes on the Blessed Field Trebuchet, trying to work it down a little bit. After that, though, I do see the Fey Enchantress, and I'm trying to zone her away while allowing the white lines to just work through these troops. You can see that the Field Trebuchet is just doing so much damage, I really don't have the tools to shut them down. My troops are just simply very, very expensive, and it's very hard to make full use of them. You can see still the Phoenix Guard is slowly but surely massacring these Grail Relic, but that is forcing them to clump, and once again, it's going to allow that Trebuchet to do brutal work against them. That said, they will drag the Grail Relic down. It's simply not fast enough. It's not quick enough to outrun the Phoenix Guard, and they will jab it to death. Actually, they don't jab it to death. It does manage to escape here, broken as it is. The White Lions did manage to rat off the Blessed Field Trebuchet, and you can see my heroic Goon Squad chasing after the Fey Enchantress. I do see her trying to kind of pull back under the cover of the Grail Knights. You see the Phoenix Guard, they're losing models. Well, we do land a Net of a Mintok, and my heroes are really on the case, and my opponent is forced to kind of pull his Grail Knights into the fray, just trying to save his Fey Enchantress against that Net of a Mintok. I really think it's a pretty nifty skill here. You can see the Phoenix Guard pushing in, and this will allow me to really drag these last two Grail Knights, who are really my opponent's last powerful striking force, down into the muck. Earthblood's not a terrible spell here, but it's just not going to be enough to really heal them, and now my opponent's Fey Enchantress is trapped here in the middle of some Phoenix Guard, alongside Tyrion and all that, and she's definitely not in a good spot. Phoenix Guard over here tearing through Foot Squires. Foot Squires, that said, the Foot Squires are sitting at 132 kills, so definitely performing very well for my opponent. And over here you can see the Noble and Tyrion and all them do chase off the Fey Enchantress, having left her severely dented. Over here, some white lines of Crace down, and 9 models are basically going to get routed pretty easily here. Though you can see the Fey Enchantress gets hit. My opponent stops for a moment, and Tyrion is on top of her. For she has basically no armor and minimal resistances. I believe about 4. Her physical resistance might be okay. I'm not entirely sure where it stands. She does have. I'm just trying to look at it real quick. She does have 20% physical resist, but that's really not enough to stop Tyrion. And now we do manage to net down the Green Knights. I'm just making great use of the net of Mintok this game, and to really slowly but surely take down my opponent's cavalry units. Unfortunately, over here, the Phoenix Guard do get broken, but in turn, the Noble is able to push in there and kind of cover their retreat. With some hefty rear charges, and this guy's really been actually pretty much a champ, running down those enemy heavy cavalry units. He's not the greatest of melee combatants by any means, but really against cavalry, he's just solid. And you can see here he does plow into the Enchantress, and he's going to start applying some pressure. You can see him hitting her for monsters, almost 400 HP there, before she does manage to pull away. And really, with this sort of combination of heroes still on the field, I'm definitely staying in an okay position. Now, my opponent, though, does have his Blessed Field Trebuchets coming back online. I simply don't have the tools to shut him down. I've introduced the Phoenix Guard, but which is getting chipped away at. So I do kind of push my heroes and just trying to give these guys the opportunity to fall back and regroup. I do have a unit of White Lines over here who are wavering but have come back, and so I will hopefully be able to stick them on the Blessed Field Trebuchet. Over here, a unit of White Lines has also managed to kind of chase off the Blessed Field Trebuchet before routing off. And so really, I'm trying to shut down that artillery fire as best I can, but you can see the Phoenix Guard here just so messed up and getting chipped away at by even the Spearman at Arms and Embezzle Mob at this point is raking in some kills. Fortunately for me, though, the Mage of Light is still in there, the Tyrion's still in there, and of course the Noble are still in there. And they're still fairly healthy, and I do believe Tyrion's Heart of Avalorn has not yet gone off. You can see the Enchantress here chasing off the Phoenix Guard, but now she has been netted. The net is so cheap right now. I do manage to catch her here with Tyrion, and of course Tyrion is just the master duelist, and he is going to knock her off her high horse, or high unicorn, I suppose. And with that, her army is simply going to lose heart and really rout off the field. Even though these Phoenix Guard did actually shatter, or were broken by that mob of peasantry. So a pyrrhic victory for the High Elves. Definitely a bit of a rough matchup, and I definitely made some micro mistakes. One of my serious mistakes was allowing my infantry to just clump up repeatedly in the arc of those trebuchets, and you can see they racked up immense amounts of kills. The Foot Squires also managed to get some pretty optimal setups, and Foot Squires actually hit very hard. They actually hit harder than White Lines of Crace to begin with, and on top of that, they've actually gotten a boost to their melee to their bonus against infantry. It used to be +8, now it's actually +9. So definitely a pretty solid option, and they were definitely carving their way through my White Lines in a pretty cost-efficient manner. In their turn, the White Lines proved pretty brutal at just hacking and slashing their way through my opponent's troops, and the Dragon Princes actually proved pretty effective at counteracting the Grail Knights. Now, in a 1-to-1, if you do unit testing, you can see Dragon Princes do not stand a chance against Grail Knights at all. But by negating that charge bonus, by either soaking up on my cavalry or using Net of Mintok, and then also providing buffs from the protection of Fa and Stand Your Ground, kind of strategically placed or utilized, I was able to really maximize the value of those Dragon Princes despite not having any heals for them. Tyrion, of course, raking in 70 kills, and it's important to keep in mind that many, if not most of these kills on Tyrion and the Noble and the Mage were all cavalry kills. These guys were really kind of running around, gooning their way through enemy Grail Knights and those sorts of units, so it's a really rather impressive and definitely a pretty solid performance there. For my opponent's build, I definitely don't think it was bad. It's important to keep in mind that, of course, the peasants are just dirt cheap, so 300 points worth of peasants, there isn't much what you can get for that value. Usually, when you do see this, what the alternate ways or alternate builds you'll see with this is that or alternate ways to do this sort of build is that you only bring one blessed field trebuchet and instead bring some Grail Knight or Grail Guardians to kind of anchor your front. Perhaps that would have been a good idea for my opponent. At the same time, the blessed field trebuchets actually performed pretty effectively in just whittling down my highly elite army and making them pretty easy to victimize. Definitely, I think the most unfortunate accident for my opponent, or mistake for my opponent, was the way he committed his Grail Knights onto the right flank, and unfortunately I missed that. Showing that, but they plowed through some of my White Lines and then immediately got caught up on the Phoenix Guard, and the Phoenix Guard just dragged them down into the muck and really slaughtered them before they could get clear. And that was simply my opponent has just too much microing going on, and he wasn't able to kind of keep track of both, or keep control of both flanks. Nonetheless, I definitely think the MVP in this match was the Mage of Light with her crazy nets of Mintok, which really were preventing enemy charges from landing in time, were stopping the Fey Enchantress from escaping, and were just being absolutely critical in so many situations. You can see the peasants here racking in 10 kills, so great performance there for 300 points worth of troops. And yeah, I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. I do hope you found it entertaining, and perhaps gave you some ideas if you're having trouble against these sorts of Brettonian builds as the High Elves. I definitely think there's some other ways to go about this, perhaps bringing more spears, not necessarily investing this much in White Lines of Crace, though I definitely think the Phoenix Guard are kind of mandatory. And yeah, I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any comments, criticism, or any suggestions of your own, be sure to share those down in the comments, and I'll respond as soon as I can. Great game to my opponent, Banghost, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.